Dr. Grover Russ Whitehurst is the Herman and George R. Brown Chair and Director of the Brown Center on Education Policy at the Brookings Institution. Previously, he was the Director of the Institute of Education Sciences at the U.S. Department of Education and U.S. Assistant Secretary for Educational Research and Improvement. Dr. Whitehurst led the What Works Clearinghouse in the U.S. Department of Education. Dr. Robert Pianta is the Dean of the Curry School of Education at the University of Virginia, the Novartis Professor of Education and Director of University of Virginia's Center for Advanced Study of Teaching and Learning. Pianta and his team developed the Classroom Assessment Scoring System to measure classroom quality. This instrument is being widely used in Head Start across the nation. Dr. Whitehurst and Dr. Pianta.
Well, good morning. I'm pleased to be here with you and pleased to be back in Texas. One reason I like to come to Texas to talk about issues in education is that this state has been a leader in education reform for the last 25 years. So when I come here, I typically go home smarter than I arrived, and so I appreciate that opportunity. That's no less the case with what you're about here today. I've been concerned with early childhood education for the better part of my career. And there's nothing more exciting going on in the nation than the Texas School Ready program. You are focusing on exactly the issues that have to be addressed if we're going to have the kind of early education and care that our students so desperately need. Why should we care about early childhood education? Let me start with emotion, and I'll end with emotion. In the middle, I'll give you just a lot of research and logic. A touchstone for me in answering this question is the experience that I had many years ago when I was working in Head Start. And I went to a local Head Start center to recruit parents to be a part of the program I was running. In doing that, I would make a spiel to parents, get them to sign permission forms, get them enrolled. And as I was driving up to the Head Start Center, I saw a young mom walking in with what I presume was her Head Start child and a younger child in tow in a stroller. And in fact, she was in the audience. And so when I packed up to leave, I saw her heading down the road again with the Head Start child and the younger child in tow, and also with a big package of materials that she was taking home with her from the Head Start Center and from me. So I asked her if she needed a ride. She accepted, and I thought I was going to be taking her around the block. In fact, it was about 3 miles later when I dropped her off in front of a dilapidated house. And I said, did you walk all the way there with your 2 young children? And she said, yes. And I said, well, gosh, that was quite a walk. Why did you do that? Her answer was, I just want to do what's best for my babies. We all want to do what's best for our babies, and those of us who are in a position to have some impact on the kind of education that mothers like that mother get for their children, I think have a moral responsibility to do the best we can. To move to the intellectual, we should care because, as we all know, there are very substantial gaps in what children know and can do that are present by the time they enter kindergarten. A typical child in the upper 20% of socioeconomic development is about 60% ahead of children in the lower 20% in terms of a whole variety of readiness skills. Children at the bottom of the socioeconomic hierarchy can be 2 years behind in readiness skills at the time they enter kindergarten. 4-year-olds, some of whom are 2 years behind after only 4 years of the passage of life. There are huge differences in vocabulary development, knowledge of the world. All of these things are important for later development. This is another look at that. This for vocabulary scores for 3- and 4-year-olds broken out by race. 50, if you can see it on this graph, is average, and here you see that black kids are about 12 to 13 points behind. That's well over a year of development in vocabulary by the time they're 3- and 4-year-olds. Another reason that we should care is the stability of the predictions we get from individual differences among children in these early skills and abilities. This figure is from work that I and colleagues did a while back. It was a longitudinal study of a large number of kids in Head Start, and we followed them well into school, measuring them at each grade on a variety of assessments of cognitive ability and social ability, though I'm focusing just on cognitive and academic skills here. And what we found is a remarkable stability in those early skills in terms of their predictability to later outcomes. What you need to focus on here are just the numbers that are interspersed among the arrows, and you can think of those as correlation coefficients. So you can see that kindergarten oral language skills can be almost perfectly predicted from pre-K oral language skills, that grade 1 and 2 oral language skills can be almost perfectly predicted from kindergarten skills, and so forth. On the pre-reading side, we're talking about things like knowledge of the alphabet, phonemic awareness. The predictions aren't quite as strong, but they are still remarkably strong. And I'll ask you to note that pre-reading skills measured in kindergarten actually predict grade 2 reading outcomes more strongly than reading ability in first grade. So these preschool skills are terrifically important in terms of laying out the map of a child's academic development through school. Why should we care theory? This is from James Heckman, a Nobel laureate at the University of Chicago, who's focused on many issues in education, and particularly on early childhood education. I'll read it for you. Skill begets skill, learning begets learning, early disadvantage, if left untreated, leads to academic and social difficulties in later years. Advantages accumulate, so do disadvantages. Heckman's point, if you will, is as the twig is bent, so grows the tree, and that we need to start early. And his view is that we overinvest in programs for children at school age and underinvest in programs in the early years. Another reason we should care is research. You can digest this and other tables later as they're posted on the web if you would like to, and I will only summarize for you the information in this particular table. And it is an analysis of long-term social and labor force outcomes for a generation of early childhood programs that were established in the 1960s and 70s. And what this table tells you is that if you look across all of these programs, that there are substantial reductions in grade retention, reductions in special education, reductions in child abuse and neglect, reductions in crime and delinquency, and increases in high school completion. It's important to note that these programs were hothouse programs, that is, they were small programs, constructed and run by developers, usually university-based developers. They were extraordinarily expensive. They started early, not just 4-year-old programs or 3-year-old programs. Some of them continued with interventions into school, and they were dealing with population and social cultural circumstances that are very different from those that exist today. Most of the mothers in these studies stayed at home. They did not work. There was little less available in the community in terms of child care or other forms of early childhood education. There was no public broadcasting. There was no Sesame Street or Between the Lions. So many things have changed. We need to look to these programs as evidence of the potential effect of early childhood, without taking them as a metric for what we will necessarily receive from our investments in the sorts of early childhood programs that are available today.